Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to take a deeper look at Venus in the sign of Gemini. I'm going to be rewinding an episode from a Planets in Profile series that I made on Venus through all 12 signs of the zodiac several years ago. I'm doing this for a few reasons. One, I know many people on the channel are new in the past 6 or 7 months and may not yet be aware of those evergreen series. The Planets in Profile series take Mercury, Mars, Venus, and currently we're in the process of making the Moon series through each of the 12 signs and give you a real deep sense of the archetypal combination of each of those planets through the signs. So today, because Venus is in Gemini to start this week after Uranus entered Gemini, we did a little exploration of Uranus into Gemini yesterday. We're going to do Venus in Gemini today. I'm going to show you this Planets in Profile episode. If you search through the playlists on my channel, you will find those Planets in Profile series. So if you like this episode, you can check out the whole library there. There's also another reason that we're doing this. Unfortunately, the power went out in my house. And it turns out that after the power went out in my house, it basically destroyed a microphone that I use for recording. And so unbeknownst to me, the entire week of content that I had created for this week had no microphone. I mean, it's something I take for granted because it's a default setting that's always plugged in, always ready to go. We lost the audio for an entire week's worth of content. And so I am having to reproduce content at the very last minute, which means, unfortunately, I'm doing some rewind episodes and trying to fill the content this week with like 0 time left in our production schedule. And so I just want to say for everyone this week, not the norm to see me rewinding old episodes. Once in a while, I'll do it, but this week has sort of been an exception because we lost the whole week worth of content. I've been doing this 8-9 years. I don't think it's ever happened before. So anyway, bear with me as I get things back on track. Everything should be sort of back to normal by next week for sure. But anyway, also, some of you were asking, I'm sure some of you were interested what's on the altar this week because we did this talk on Uranus into Gemini yesterday. So for those of you who are interested, I'm going to switch my camera right now. You can see over there, I've got these 2 little things on my altar this week that my daughters made me. One is a purple and blue yin yang symbol. The other one is a crystal ball. They made them out of clay. I put those on my altar this week as a way of really celebrating the childlike spirit of the universe, a childlike presence in my life through my kids, the creative presence, the innocence, the beauty, the childlike wonder. And it's a way of me also just connecting parenting to something divine. Sometimes parenting feels mundane. This is a way of connecting it for me back to something bigger, bigger than myself and bigger than just, what I'm dealing with on a day-to-day level. Remembering that it's a sacred thing to get to be a parent. That for me is, sometimes I need that reminder because parenting can be just really full on. Anyway, I hope you'll enjoy this exploration of Venus into Gemini today. And like I said, we're working this week to get content caught up in the wake of this very weird situation that happened, losing all of our audio. So anyway, have a good one, and we will see you again tomorrow. Bye.
Hi, everybody. This is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and this is another episode of Planets in Profile. So I'm finally catching up, and we're doing Venus in Gemini today, which is nice. Venus just entered Gemini not too long ago, so this one I feel like I'm not too late on. So get some time to think about this particular presentation as Venus goes through Gemini, which should be helpful for us. So if you're new to this for the first time, there should be a playlist on my YouTube channel with all of the Planets in Profile episodes that I've ever done. I've been tracking Venus and Mars around the zodiac since last summer. And once I finish up with Venus and Mars, and we'll go on to the other planets as well. So Venus in Gemini, let's take a look. Well, some of the most basic features of Venus in Gemini are going to be, you'll be familiar with this breakdown, right? Whenever we are looking at Venus or Mars or any planet in any sign other than its own sign, and they all have 2 signs except for the sun and the moon, which have 1, then we have to interpret the planet in terms of its relationship with the host, the oikodespotes, as the Greek astrologers would say, the steward or the host. So Venus in Gemini is in the domicile or home of Mercury. Now, Gemini itself is a warm, moist, double-bodied masculine air sign and the home of Mercury Hermes. So whenever Venus is in Gemini, it is qualified or modified by those qualities, as well as, generally speaking, by the position of Mercury in whatever chart we're looking at. So you always have to weigh all of that or take all of that into consideration. For example, right now, as Venus is in Gemini, Mercury is in the sign of Cancer. Okay, so Mercury in Cancer is currently the host for Venus in Gemini, which means that whatever Venus in Gemini might want to do, she's going to get all of the raw material that she desires from Mercury, who is in turn in the sign of the moon in Cancer. So tracing out dignity trails, I like to call them, like this, is a good way to get to know exactly what's going on, or what a planet is signifying, I should say. So planets represent a lot of different things. They can have the rulership over a house or a place in the birth chart. They can represent their own topics. Venus may represent siblings in a chart by virtue of ruling the third house or being in the third house, but also may represent love, harmony, beauty. So those are Venus's general significations: beauty, harmony, love, friendship, sexuality, sensuality, anything that has to do with agreement, as well as benefits, blessings, and good fortune. Those are all Venusian things. Now, when Venus is in Mercury's masculine sign, Venus is going to be modified in a very particular way. The good news about Gemini is that Gemini holds a trine to Libra, which is one of Venus's home signs. So Venus does have a home sign in which she's comfortable, that's also airy, warm and moist, etc. So air signs, the element of air is like that. And what that generally means is that Venus in Gemini is going to be a very social Venus, very flirtatious, very outgoing, very stimulated. This is a Venus who likes her latte. You know what I mean? This is a Venus who might like a shot of espresso. This is a Venus who is in the marketplace, in the city, in the classroom, reading, writing, thinking, studying, conversing, moving about. It's a very busy social and mental or intellectual Venus all together. It's a very inventive Venus. You could say that it's a very flirtatious, clever, and sometimes a little deceptive Venus as well, because Mercury can add the element of sort of disguise and trickery and things like that. So a wide range of archetypal possibilities for Venus in the sign of Mercury's sign of Gemini. This is a very fertile Venus for the most part, because air signs, warm and moist, are conducive to life and growth. Let me give you an example. In the ancient system of the planetary joys, Mercury was said to rejoice in the first place, so the first house, which is where everything rises into its first appearance. And situated right next to it is Saturn in the 12th place, where it takes its joy. Saturn and Mercury were the triplicity lords of the air signs. And so we have this idea of the element of air being associated with the rising, something that which rises. Well, in ancient elemental theory, air rises, it rises up. At the top of the chart, you have the joy of Jupiter in the 11th and the sun in the 9th. Those are the triplicity rulers of the fire signs. So air rises up to fire, right? Air, fire. And then on the 7th, right around the 7th, you have Mars, which is associated with the water, goes down to water. And then at the bottom, you have Moon's joy in the 3rd and Venus's joy in the 5th, which are the triplicity rulers of the earth. So you have this rotation of the elemental sphere implicit within the ancient system of the joys. Air, however, is the first one. Air rises. Similarly, the soul was associated with the first house and with Mercury, and the life breath, which has a tendency to want to rise up. Think about it. When you're out with friends and you feel enlivened, it's as though your soul is being lifted up. I'm lifted up by the presence of my friends, or by good music, or whatever. There's a way in which we feel lifted up and almost out of our body. So air is like that as an element. Air is also warm and moist. And so it lifts and it circulates. It lifts and it moves. And the warmth and the movement are very fertile. So a lot of people think of air signs just as mental and rational. And if we do that, then we tend to get into more like Saturnine thinking about air. We sort of project Saturn onto air. And then all of a sudden we have an idea about air that's too dry. Air is in ancient theory, the element of air is moist. It has a fertile quality to it. So this is a very fertile Venus, one that can, that's why we say, you know, sometimes Venus in Gemini likes multiple partners, or maybe, you know, polyamorous, or maybe sometimes you think about bisexuality, or being able to be gender fluid, or you also, right? But these things are not just, oh, well, because there's a duality in Gemini. It's also because air is moist, warm, fertile, and circulates. It moves and it rises. So Mercury is associated with this place. And of course, Mercury is also Hermes and associated with the hermaphrodite. So there's also this really interesting sort of gender fluidity that's apparent when Venus, feminine, is in the masculine domain of Mercury, who tends to be kind of a flip-flopper or very fluid between the genders anyway. So these are all things that have a great effect on Venus in Gemini. Now, you know, Gemini is also a very youthful sign, the sign of the twins, and it's the last sign of spring. So you always have to remember this kind of spring, youthful, sort of flirtatious, gender fluid quality that's associated with Gemini and Mercury in this sign. And then you also think about air as outgoing and masculine, meaning it's assertive. It's energy from the center outward. That doesn't mean that it's like Aries, you know, where it's like, so it's very willful. It's kind of like if you, I can't help but think of my 3.5-year-old like all the time, because I love her and because she's just like, I'm learning so much about astrology just by like being around her, what to speak of just life and my own stuff too. But, you know, my daughter is, she's ruled by Mercury. She's a Virgo rising. And similar idea, right? Mercury ruled people, or just Mercury in general. When you are in a room with Mercury, there's always something, if it's in a masculine position, has some masculine kind of kick behind it, which does in my daughter's case, then you have something that's always kind of inserting, always speaking, saying, inserting stimulation. My wife and daughters are at a retreat this weekend, a yoga retreat, which I was going to go on, but I ended up staying home because I have so much work I have to catch up on. And it's so quiet in the house. It's, oh my God, is it quiet, right? Because my little Gemini, you know, my little Virgo, you know, my little Mercury, my little daughter of Mercury isn't here. Because my wife's a double Taurus, right? She can be pretty calm and chill. She's not, you know, and my other daughter is a Leo. She's very calm too. But my 3.5-year-old child of Mercury, right? Anytime you're in the room, it's like stimulation, thought, idea, invention, fun, quirky, joke, mischievous, you know, it's like that all the time. So this Venus in Gemini can also be really assertive, but not necessarily, pretty open in terms of where that assertiveness goes. Like, my daughter will be assertive, but she doesn't really care what happens as a result. Like, she'll say something or do something, and then it kind of goes out, and however it's met, she's like, oh, isn't that interesting? Now something else. Whereas a fire sign might want to express itself and see some result. Fire is more rigid, it's drier. Fire is hot and dry. So fire has more will and wants to conform its assertive energy, wants to see conforming results. You know, I will conform, I will will the world to conform with me, you know, that kind of thing. The airy quality is more flexible about what comes or what results from whatever the stimulus is that it's putting out all the time. So yeah, so that's something to think about with Venus in Gemini. And I think let's go into talking a little bit about some of the struggles. So some of the struggles may have to do with being overly stimulated, too many directions at once, this kind of thing. Sometimes it can struggle with being duplicitous, being tricky or sneaky or deceptive, gossip. Sometimes there's a little bit of scandal too, of being, what do I want to say? Like of presenting yourself one way, but of being a very different way in private, sort of hiding. Those kinds of things come just because of the mutability and shiftability of Mercury in this sign. And you also have the kind of mythology of the twins, the good twin and the dark twin, the light twin and the dark twin, the kind of good and bad side of it. And sometimes they're reversed as well. Sometimes the good one will be the bad one, and the bad one will actually be the good one. Then you have other mercurial issues. For example, sometimes one will wish or hope to be Venusian, meaning enjoying of harmony and love and beauty and friendship and agreement. But Mercury tends to be really mental, analytical, and skeptical, or even sort of rational. And so that can sometimes just kill the ability to find fluidity. This is a similar way of saying you may not be able to decide upon something. You could also say that you may not be able to agree upon something. And that can be a challenge for Venus in Mercury's sign. So those are some potential mercurial issues. However, you may also find that there are incredible benefits related to Venus and Mercury. Whether that, well, I'll show you in some of the examples. So let's talk about some famous people with Venus and Gemini. How about Tupac? There's someone who has incredible lyrical talent, right? He has this ability to be this incredibly fluid and charming rapper, who's basically a poet, a poet, musician, artist, but it's all words. It's a very Venus and Gemini. Also, he has a trickster energy to him and a clever, funny, charming quality to him. And also kind of, there's two sides to him. There's the peace-loving side who, and then there's a side of him that was wrapped up in more complicated and potentially violent issues. So two sides. Elon Musk, great inventor. Mercury traditionally was a planet of inventors. Venus, think about Tesla. He's designing all of these incredibly beautiful, he has all these beautiful inventions. They're very attractive and sort of next, almost sort of sci-fi futuristic stuff that he's doing. And it's, but he's gotten in trouble for, I don't remember what it was, but he's gotten in a lot of trouble because of his social media presence, things that he said that he shouldn't have said, overselling things, just kind of, he gets himself into trouble. And he has this sort of slightly trickster, almost like deceptive quality to him that he's gotten in trouble with, I think, regarding his own stocks, the stocks of Tesla and stuff like that. How about Bob Dylan? Bob Dylan, singer, songwriter, poet. He wins the Nobel Prize for his contribution to music. He's a poet, and he's also kind of this mercurial trickster. And I don't remember who it was, Joan Baez maybe, who wrote a love song, Diamonds and Rust or something like that. And it was about him, if I remember correctly. And, he was kind of an elusive figure. How about Harrison Ford? Harrison Ford, you think about Star Wars and Han Solo, right? He plays a smuggler, a handsome, charming, but cocksure and duplicitous smuggler who ends up becoming a hero. But he played a lot of roles where there was this kind of charming duality. So just Han Solo really strikes me as Venus and Gemini. At any rate, how about Shakespeare? The wordsmith of the world, basically, right? Shakespeare, and you think about all of his puns, his play on language, his ability to be philosophical and spiritual, but also critical and skeptical. To be, he was just such a brilliant mind, really an innovator of the pen and the written word. And of course, it was very theatrical and very beautiful and pleasing. So Shakespeare, George Michael. Here's one of the what are the poster children for the mainstream culture, sort of becoming more accepting and aware of gay people in the arts, right? And just his contribution in that way, and the sort of, sort of gender fluidity that he displayed in his career. Bill Cosby, a sort of duplicitous character, right? A comedian, very clever with words, very charming and likable, but also had this kind of hidden dark side to him, obviously. Bette Davis, a famous actress who played these really unsympathetic characters, and she was really like a beloved actress, but could also play these like really sort of horrible, these just people who really weren't very likable, and yet she herself was very, very likable. So it's just really interesting. Bette Davis, just if you know much about, I grew up watching a lot of old movies. So Julian Assange, WikiLeaks. Yeah, there's someone who's beloved by people for what he does as a journalist, but also sort of potentially someone who was, turned by the Russians in order to, do the bidding of other governments. And, I'll just leave it at, because a lot of people have very loaded opinions about him. We'll just say he's a complicated figure in the world of journalism and free information and possibly spying and other stuff. So Julian Assange. Kate Upton. I don't know much about Kate Upton, but when I found her and I read a little bit about her, I thought it was really interesting to find that a lot of people have attributed some of her massive amount of success that she's had as a model and actress and so on and so forth to several things that really went viral on social media. And she's one of the great like social media success stories. That was something that I read about her that I found interesting. That's very Venus and Gemini. Venus, the goddess, getting in on the press and the virtual world and the media and gaining a lot of fame in that way. So those are the benefits that can come. Venus benefits from mercurial things. They go together. Amy Schumer, she's a comedian who's obviously really, she's really beloved and funny and like charming, and also like really kind of crass and dirty, and so she has this really like lovable but kind of trickstery, very like silver-tongued, quick silvery, hermetic thing that she does as an actress and as a performer. So she's awesome. So she's always gotten me to laugh anyway. So at any rate, that just gives you a feeling for Venus and Gemini. So check out where Venus and Gemini is traveling through your chart currently, or anytime that Venus is in Gemini, and you will see Venus bringing all of the things, all of her own significations into Mercury's house. She wants love, friendship, harmony, beauty, etc. And she ends up getting mercurial things. How about rap music? She gets mercurial things. How about inventions? How about the spoken word poetry or the playing of guitars? Or the crafting of theatrical masterpieces, or, people who are really good with the spoken word, or like that, people who are really interested in journalism and media, right? All those kinds of things come in. So it's a good way of putting them together. And I couldn't resist this picture of Tupac, who is very much is Venus and Gemini in this picture. So at any rate, I hope all of you that have Venus and Gemini out there also liked hearing your name called. And we will hopefully be in touch again soon when Venus goes into Cancer, where then we'll be talking about Venus in the sign of the moon. So that's what I've got. Take care, everyone. Bye.